One neighbor asked for sugar and ended up sweetening the life of a lonely father, an unexpected love story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave your like, and comment where you're watching from. The doorbell echoed through apartment 12B like a desperate cry on a warm March morning in Brooklyn. Ryan Mitchell set down his cold coffee cup on the kitchen table, still cluttered with moving boxes, and shuffled his bare feet across the creaky hardwood floor. His calloused hands, worn from holding rulers and mechanical pencils, trembled slightly as he reached for the worn golden doorknob. "Who could it be at this hour?" he murmured, running a hand through his messy brown hair. It was only 7 in the morning on a Monday, and he had barely managed to sleep 3 hours straight. The deep bags under his eyes betrayed yet another sleepless night, lost among unfinished projects and thoughts that refused to quiet down. When he opened the door, he found a woman of average height, with dark brown hair cascading over her shoulders, wearing a floral nightgown and blue flip-flops. She held a white porcelain cup adorned with tiny floral designs, and her shy smile contrasted with the determination in her honey-colored eyes. "Hi, sorry to bother you so early," she began, nervously biting her lower lip. "I'm Sarah from 12A. You must be the new neighbor, right? Look, I know this is a bit awkward, but do you happen to have a little sugar? I just ran out today, and I need to make my daughter's hot chocolate before taking her to school." Ryan watched her for a few seconds, noticing how she shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. There was something in her direct yet vulnerable demeanor that completely disarmed him. Of course, no problem," he replied, opening the door wider. "Come in, please. Sorry for the mess. I'm still getting organized here." Sarah hesitated for a moment before crossing the threshold. The apartment mirrored hers in layout, but was completely different in organization. Stacked cardboard boxes filled the living room, some open, revealing architecture books, sketch pads, and drafting tools. The walls were still bare, except for a few hooks where pictures would likely hang. "Recent move?" she asked, observing the furniture covered with white sheets. 2 months. Ryan replied, walking toward the kitchen. "I still haven't had the courage to unpack everything. Sometimes it feels like if I don't unpack, I can always change my mind and leave." She followed him, noticing how he moved carefully between the boxes, as if he knew each obstacle by heart. The kitchen was tidier than the rest of the house. White refrigerator humming, clean stove, small table with 2 chairs, and some basic utensils neatly arranged in the drying rack. "I totally understand," Sarah said, leaning against the doorframe. "When I moved here last year, it took me months to hang up the pictures. It's like we don't want to commit to the place, right?" Ryan opened the cabinet and pulled out a half-empty bag of granulated sugar. He poured a generous amount into her cup, and when their hands briefly touched during the transfer, both felt a kind of soft electricity. "Thank you so much," she said, smiling more naturally now. "Lily, my daughter, gets unbearable when she doesn't have her hot chocolate in the morning. 8 years old and already has all her little quirks." "Kids are like that," Ryan commented, leaning against the sink. "I have 2, but they only stay with me on weekends. Alex is 17 and Ethan is 15. Tough age, you know. They're still a bit rebellious about all the changes." Sarah noticed a shadow pass over his eyes, a deep sadness he tried to mask with a forced smile. "Divorce is always complicated for everyone. We think it will be easier, but yeah, it doesn't really work that way," he finished, stirring the sugar with a small spoon. "Did you go through that too?" "About 1.5 years ago. The worst is over, but there are still days." She sighed, looking out the small kitchen window that faced the building's courtyard, especially when Lily asks, "When her dad is coming to visit again, and I don't know what to say." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of traffic on Main Street and the clattering of pots from other apartments. It was as if they both recognized in each other a painful familiarity, the mark of someone trying to rebuild their life after an emotional shipwreck. "What do you do for a living?" Sarah asked, noticing the rolls of tracing paper on the table. "Architecture. I have a small office. I mostly work as a freelancer. Residential projects, mainly renovations," Ryan explained, picking up one of the drawings. "And you?" "I'm a preschool teacher. I work at a school nearby in Maple Grove. I love what I do, even if the salary isn't great." She laughed without humor. "But the kids keep me sane, you know? They have this ability to force you to live in the present." From her apartment came the sound of a television turning on and a child's voice calling, "Mom, where's my candy?" "Oh, Lily's awake," Sarah said, lifting her cup. "I better go before she comes looking for me in her pajamas down the hall." "Of course, I can imagine," Ryan smiled, walking her to the door. "And thanks for the chat. It's been a while since well, it was nice." Just as she was in the hallway, Sarah turned around. "Look, if you need anything at all, just knock on the door. We who are starting over need to help each other, right?" "Definitely," he replied, watching her walk to the next door. "And Sarah, feel free to come by for sugar whenever you want." She genuinely laughed for the first time that morning. "Be careful what you offer. I make a lot of sweets when I'm anxious." After she entered her apartment, Ryan felt a strange warmth in his chest, a flicker of hope amidst the chaos of his new life. Ryan remained at the door for a few more minutes, listening to the sounds of her morning routine through the thin walls, the microwave beeping, the child excitedly talking about school, Sarah responding with infinite patience. It was the sound of a family functioning, something he had forgotten how it felt. He closed the door and went back to the kitchen, noticing that his coffee cup was on the table, still with a bit of warm liquid at the bottom. For the first time since the move, the apartment didn't feel like just a storage of furniture and bad memories. There was something different in the air, a possibility he couldn't quite name. He picked up his phone and checked his messages. 3 projects waiting for approval, 2 clients wanting last-minute changes, and a message from Alex asking if he could skip the weekend visit because he had a party. He sighed deeply and put the device in his pocket. Real life was there, waiting, but for a few minutes he had experienced something he thought he had lost forever. A simple and honest conversation with someone who understood his struggles without needing long explanations. He looked at the sugar packet on the counter and smiled. Who would have thought that such a simple ingredient could create the first real connection he had made in months? 3 weeks had passed since the sugar incident, and Ryan began to notice that his morning schedule had subtly adjusted. He now woke up at 6:45, just enough time to shower, put on clean clothes, and leave the apartment exactly at 7:20, a time when he often crossed paths with Sarah and Lily in the elevator. On that Tuesday in April, the weather was shifting from the muggy heat to a typical autumn chill. Ryan adjusted his denim jacket over his white shirt and grabbed his well-worn brown leather backpack. Inside, besides his laptop and work materials, he always carried a small notepad and some mechanical pencils, a habit he had developed to cope with anxiety, doodling architectural structures even during casual conversations. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, Sarah was there with Lily, who was wearing her blue and white school uniform and carrying a unicorn backpack almost as big as she was. "Good morning, Ryan," Sarah greeted with a more relaxed smile than the first time. She wore dark jeans, a coral top, and a light grey knit cardigan. Her hair was tied up in a slightly messy bun, and Ryan noticed small rebellious strands escaping around her face. "Good morning, girls," he replied, stepping into the elevator. "How's your week going?" Lily was watching him with evident curiosity, her bright brown eyes studying every detail of his appearance. "Mom said you design houses," the girl said directly, without beating around the bush. "Lily!" Sarah gently reprimanded, blushing a little. "You don't need to interrogate him." "No problem," Ryan laughed, crouching down to be at the child's level. "It's true. I draw houses and apartments. Sometimes I renovate, sometimes I create from scratch. It's pretty cool." "Can you make a castle?" Lily asked, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Of course I can. Want to see?" Ryan opened his backpack and took out the notepad. With quick and precise movements of the pencil, he began sketching towers, walls, and a drawbridge. The elevator descended slowly, but no one seemed to be in a hurry. Sarah watched, fascinated, as he transformed simple lines into a complex and detailed structure. His hands moved with absolute confidence over the paper, as if he had drawn that castle 1,000 times in his imagination. "Wow!" Lily exclaimed when he finished. "Can I keep the drawing?" "Sure, princess." Ryan tore off the sheet and handed it to her. "But there's one condition. You have to color it and show me how it turned out, okay?" The girl nodded excitedly, hugging the paper to her chest. When the elevator reached the ground floor, she ran out to show the drawing to the doorman, leaving the adults a few steps behind. "You didn't have to," Sarah started, but Ryan interrupted her. "It was a pleasure. It's been a while since I drew something just for fun." He packed his materials back into his backpack. "She's a sweetheart. Must be a lot of work. But the good kind." "She's my light," Sarah said with genuine tenderness in her voice. "After the divorce, she was the one who gave me the strength to start over. Sometimes I think kids are more resilient than adults." They walked together to the exit of the building, where Lily was already waiting impatiently by the glass door. Maple Street was bustling with the typical morning activity: cars searching for parking, people rushing to the subway, the distant sound of construction on some nearby building. "Which way are you going?" Ryan asked, noticing that Sarah seemed hesitant about which direction to take. "Lily's school first, then work. I'm between Main Street and Brookside," she explained, pointing to the right. "And you?" "I have a meeting in Brookside today. I can give you a ride to Lily's school if you'd like. My car is right there." He pointed to a silver Civic parked in front of the building, nothing luxurious but well-maintained. Sarah hesitated for a moment, weighing the practicality of the offer against the intimacy it would imply. "We don't want to disrupt your route." "Not at all, it's on my way. And honestly," he lowered his voice, "it would be nice to have company in traffic. Lately I've been talking to myself in the car, which is a bit concerning." She laughed, and it was a genuine laugh that warmed something in his chest. "All right. And then, Lily, shall we accept Ryan's ride?" The girl clapped her hands excitedly. "Can I choose the music?" "Now you're pushing it," Ryan joked, opening the car doors. "My sound system only plays old people's music." During the 15-minute drive to the school, the car filled with overlapping conversations. Lily was telling about a science project involving plants. Sarah explained the challenges of teaching 5-year-olds to share toys, while Ryan shared funny stories about clients who requested impossible modifications in designs. There was a client who wanted a transparent spiral staircase in the middle of the living room, but didn't want anyone to see who was going up, he recounted, stopping at the red light on Elm Street. "I spent 3 days trying to explain that transparent and invisible are different things." "And did you succeed?" Sarah asked, clearly amused. "In the end, I convinced her to go with a regular staircase with frosted glass. It turned out beautiful, but it was nothing like what she had initially imagined." Ryan smiled. "Sometimes the job is more psychology than architecture." When they arrived at the school, a 2-story building painted light yellow with a yard full of colorful toys, Lily quickly jumped out of the car but returned to the driver's window. "Ryan, will you be in the elevator tomorrow?" "Probably," he replied, lightly tapping her forehead with his finger. "But only if you bring me the colorful castle, deal?" "Deal!" she shouted, already running to find her friends in the schoolyard. Sarah lingered outside the car for a moment. Thanks for the ride. And sorry if Lily was too intense. She hasn't had much male contact since her dad, well, she's great. Reminds me of my kids at that age. Everything is new, everything is possible, Ryan said, but his expression darkened slightly. Now they're 17 and 15 and think their dad is the biggest failure in the world. I'm sure that's not true, Sarah replied gently. Adolescence is complicated for everyone. They'll understand when they're older. I hope so. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing them, you know, like every change, every decision I make pushes them further away, he confessed, surprising himself with his own honesty. He wasn't used to opening up like this with people he had just met. Sarah leaned a bit toward the window. Can I make a suggestion? Draw something for them too. It doesn't have to be a castle, but something that shows you're thinking of them. Sometimes the simplest gestures are the most impactful. He watched her for a few seconds, noticing the sincerity in her voice, and the way she nervously twisted her hands while speaking, a habit he had already noticed, as if she always doubted whether or not to express her opinions. That's a good idea. Thank you, he finally said. Sarah? Yes? If you want, I can give you a ride on other days too. It's no trouble at all, and it's nice to have someone to talk to. She smiled, and Ryan realized it was the first completely disarmed smile he had seen since he met her. I would love that. Thank you. As he drove toward Brookside, Ryan found himself humming a song he hadn't heard in years, a tune he used to play when the boys were little and he took them to school. For the first time in months, the prospect of going home at the end of the day didn't feel so heavy. There was something to look forward to the next morning, a small routine that gave meaning to the dragging, monotonous days. He stopped at a light and grabbed his phone to check messages. Alex had sent a "Good morning, Dad," something rare lately. Maybe Sarah was right about drawing something for the kids. Maybe small gestures really did make a difference. The smell of warm French bread and freshly brewed coffee wafted through Johnson's Bakery as Ryan pushed open the glass door that Friday morning. It was his weekend ritual, waking up early, even when the kids weren't coming, and having a strong coffee before facing the day. The bakery was on the corner of Main Street and Maple Grove, just 2 blocks from his apartment, and had become his refuge during lonely moments. Mr. Johnson, the bakery owner, a man in his 60s with a grey moustache and always pristine apron, greeted him with the familiar wave of someone who knows the habits of regular customers. "Good morning, Ryan. The usual." "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Sure, coffee with a splash of milk and 2 slices of toasted bread with butter," Ryan replied, settling onto the tall stool next to the counter. He liked that spot because he could watch the street activity through the window while sipping his coffee, and the chatter of other customers made him feel less isolated. He was stirring sugar into his coffee when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Aunt Sarah, can I have a chocolate truffle?" Ryan turned and saw Lily holding hands with Sarah, both dressed in casual weekend clothes. The girl wore a pink t-shirt with a cat design and a denim skirt, while Sarah had on a white blouse, black leggings and sneakers. Her hair down framed her face more relaxed than during the week. "You can, but just one because we're still going to have lunch," Sarah replied, noticing Ryan at the counter. "Hi, what a coincidence." "Hi, girls," he smiled, stepping down from the stool. "Did you also discover the best coffee in the area?" "We discovered it a long time ago," Lily said proudly. "We come here every Saturday after gymnastics. Mom has coffee, and I have sweets." "Gymnastics?" Ryan asked, genuinely interested. "Where do you practice?" "At the gym in Central Park," Sarah explained, ordering a latte for herself. "Lily started a few months ago after, well, the psychologist said that physical activity would help her manage anxiety better." Ryan noticed how she avoided mentioning the divorce directly, protecting her daughter even in what seemed like a casual conversation. "That's a great idea. I also go to a gym there, but I go on Saturday mornings. I usually run on the outdoor track and then do some weight training." "Really?" Sarah seemed surprised. "What time do you go? Lily's gymnastics class is from 8 to 9. I usually arrive around 7:30, 8 o'clock. I like to avoid the crowd," he laughed. "It's funny how we can frequent the same places and never run into each other." Mr. Johnson brought the orders, Lily's chocolate truffle on a napkin, Sarah's coffee with milk in a large cup, and topped off Ryan's coffee. The three settled at a small table by the window, where they could see the growing bustle of Saturday morning in Brooklyn. "And your kids?" Sarah asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Are they coming today?" Ryan's face darkened slightly. "Alex cancelled last night. He said he had a school project to finish, but I think that's just an excuse. Ethan is coming, but only in the late afternoon. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing them little by little." Lily, who was focused on eating her candy, without letting the filling escape, looked up. "My dad doesn't come anymore either. Mom said he's busy, but I think he forgot about me." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah lovingly ran her hand through her daughter's hair, while Ryan felt a tightening in his chest as he recognized the same tone of abandonment in the girl's voice that he sometimes perceived in himself. "Sometimes adults get lost, Lily," Ryan said softly. "It's not that they forget about the kids. It's that they don't really know how to act when everything suddenly changes." "Do you think so?" she asked, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "I'm sure. When I was a kid, my parents separated too. I thought it was my fault, that if I were nicer, smarter, they would get back together," Ryan shared, surprising himself with his own openness. "It took me years to understand that sometimes people just can't live together anymore, even if they care for each other." Sarah watched him attentively, noting how he chose his words carefully, trying to be honest without scaring the child. There was something deeply touching in the way he addressed Lily, without condescension, but with the kindness of someone who truly cared. "Mom cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping," Lily confessed, licking her sticky fingers. "But when I wake up, she pretends everything is fine." "Lily," Sarah began, clearly uncomfortable with her daughter's revelation. "It's okay," Ryan gently interrupted. "Moms do cry sometimes. My dad also cried when he thought I wasn't watching. It's not because they're weak or because they don't love us. It's because growing up is hard, even for adults." "Do you cry too?" Lily asked directly. Ryan hesitated for a moment, looking at Sarah, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. "Sometimes, yes, especially when I miss my kids or when I'm worried if I'm being a good dad." "I think you're a good dad," Lily declared with absolute conviction. "You drew a castle for me and didn't ask for anything in return. Good dads do that." The smile that spread across Ryan's face was genuine and transformative. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, a mix of tenderness and admiration for how he had handled the delicate conversation. "Thank you, Princess. That means a lot to me," he said, extending his hand for a formal handshake. Lily giggled and enthusiastically clapped her hand against his. "Ryan," Sarah began hesitantly, "if you don't have plans this morning, would you like to go to the park with us? Lily always wants to play on the playground after gymnastics, and it would be nice to have adult company for a change." He seemed to consider the offer for a few seconds. "I would love to, but I have to warn you that I'm terrible at kids' games. My kids always complained that I took everything too seriously." "I'll teach you," Lily offered excitedly. "It's easy, you just have to pretend the slide is a giant mountain and the swing is a flying horse." "Sounds complicated," Ryan laughed, "but I'll give it a try." Sarah paid the bill for the sweets, while Ryan insisted on paying for the coffees. They walked together through the still, quiet streets of Brooklyn, Lily skipping ahead of the two adults, occasionally stopping to watch dogs or comment on shop windows. "Thank you for talking to her that way," Sarah said quietly. taking advantage of a moment when the girl was distracted watching a golden retriever puppy. Sometimes I don't know how to explain certain things. I'm afraid of saying too much or too little. You're doing really well, Ryan replied sincerely. She's a confident, loving, curious child. That doesn't happen by chance. There are days when I feel completely lost, like I've been improvising my whole life and hoping not to mess anything up irreparably, she confessed, stopping to tie her daughter's sneaker. Welcome to the single-parent club, Ryan smiled sadly. I think that feeling of improvisation is universal. The difference is that before, when we were married, we could share the blame. Now we have to deal with all the wrong decisions on our own. They arrived at Central Park when the crowd was still moderate. The air was fresh, with that characteristic smell of wet grass and earth that large urban parks retain even in the middle of the city. Lily immediately ran to the playground, first choosing the tower-shaped slide. "Come on, Ryan! You have to pretend you're climbing a castle to save a princess," she shouted from the top. Ryan looked at Sarah, who laughed and gestured for him to go ahead. He climbed the steps of the playground, dramatizing each step as if it were an epic climb, to the absolute delight of the girl. Watching him play with her daughter, Sarah felt a strange mix of gratitude and melancholy. It had been a long time since Lily had laughed so carefree in the presence of a man, and it had been a long time since she herself had felt so at ease in someone's company, as thoughts of the opposite sex crossed her mind. Perhaps, she pondered while sitting on a nearby bench, small coincidences like encounters in elevators and bakeries could be the beginning of something bigger, something neither of them was looking for, but both secretly needed. The schoolyard buzzed with activity on that hot June afternoon. Volunteer mums and dads spread out among makeshift wooden stalls, rolls of colourful bunting and boxes of decorations that seemed to have come straight from a country fair supply store. The smell of roasted corn mingled with the sweet aroma of caramel apples being prepared at the candy stall, creating a festive atmosphere that even the most serious adults couldn't resist. Sarah arrived at 2 in the afternoon, carrying 2 large bags filled with crepe paper, fabric and hot glue. She wore a white t-shirt, denim shorts and comfortable sneakers, a practical outfit for an afternoon of crafting. Her hair was tied in a side braid and she wore a colourful bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Lily that had become her lucky charm. "Sarah, so glad you could make it," greeted Ms. Johnson, the educational coordinator, an energetic woman in her 50s, who managed the preparations with the efficiency of a general. "You're in charge of decorating the fishing booth, along with Lily's dad. Ryan." "Oh, he's already here?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual while scanning the crowd for the familiar figure among the working groups. "He arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's back there trying to make sense of the technical drawings for the booth we prepared." Ms. Johnson laughed. "Poor guy. I don't think he expected a fishing booth would require structural engineering." Sarah walked toward the back of the yard, passing groups of mothers cutting bunting, fathers assembling wooden structures, and children who had been recruited to paint directional signs. The sound of hammers, laughter, and country music playing in the background created a cheerful cacophony that made her smile involuntarily. She found Ryan crouched beside a pile of wooden slats, studying a paper with drawings that looked more like hieroglyphics. He wore a grey t-shirt, faded jeans, and leather boots, clearly prepared for some heavy lifting. A tape measure hung from his belt, and he was jotting down notes in a small notepad with the concentration of someone solving a complex engineering problem. "Problems with the design?" she asked, placing the bags down beside him. Ryan looked up and smiled, appearing genuinely relieved to see her. "Hey, I was trying to decipher this drawing here, but I think whoever made it has never seen a fishing booth in real life." He showed her the paper, filled with disproportionate lines and impossible measurements. "According to this, our booth would be 4 meters tall and 50 centimeters wide." Sarah laughed, taking the paper from his hands. Let me see. Ah, I see the problem. This was drawn by Ms. Smith, who is great with kids but terrible with measurements. She did the same thing last year. The mail booth ended up looking like a skyscraper. So you already have experience with these school festivities? Ryan asked, starting to sort the wood by size. Unfortunately, yes. Last year I was still married, so I was volunteering for everything. I learned that schools always need free labor, she replied, grabbing the hot glue from the bag. And you? Have you ever participated in a school fair? When my kids were younger, yes. But it's been about 5 years since I've been to one. Alex and Ethan think school fairs are childish. Ryan made air quotes with a sad smile. Sometimes I miss the days when they got excited about anything. Sarah noticed the change in his expression and decided to steer the conversation in a different direction. Well, today you'll get to relive the experience, and I guarantee it'll be less stressful than dealing with moody teenagers. They began working together with a natural rhythm. Ryan, with his construction experience, took charge of the structural part of the booth, measuring and cutting the wood with millimeter precision. Sarah handled the creative side, transforming ordinary crepe paper into colorful flowers and creating a backdrop that looked like it came from a professional set. Wow, you have a knack for this, Ryan commented, watching her fold blue tissue paper into perfect petals. Where did you learn to do decorations like this? Out of necessity, she replied, focused on her task. When you earn a teacher's salary and have to throw a birthday party for a child, you learn to be creative. YouTube became my crafting university. I completely understand. When I opened my office, I learned to do a bit of everything. Marketing, accounting, decorating. Sometimes I think being an architect is only 10% of my job. Ryan laughed, testing the stability of the structure he had built. All right, the base is solid. You can start decorating. They worked for 2 hours under the hot June sun, stopping only to drink water and snack on the treats that other moms offered. The conversation flowed naturally between them. Ryan shared funny stories about eccentric clients, while Sarah recounted hilarious classroom adventures with 5-year-olds. There was one time a student asked me why adults get sad when they drink, Sarah said, gluing the last flowers onto the backdrop. When I asked what she meant, she explained that her dad always cried after drinking that stinky water. Oh, that's heavy, Ryan grimaced. How did you handle that? I talked to the mother the next day. I found out she was going through the same thing I was. Husband with alcohol problems. Denial. Trying to hide it from the kids, Sarah sighed. The difference is she was still trying to save her marriage. And what about you? He asked, stopping to look directly at her. Sarah hesitated. Her hands paused mid-motion while attaching a small flag. I tried for 2 years. Couples therapy, support groups, promises of change, until I realized I was teaching Lily that love means accepting mistreatment. It was brave to leave, Ryan said softly. It was desperate, she corrected him. Bravery would have been leaving before she started to think that yelling was normal in a family. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the sounds of the fair being set up around them. Ryan returned to working on the structure, but his mind was processing what Sarah had shared. There was a quiet strength in her that he deeply admired. The ability to make tough decisions, prioritizing her daughter's well-being. And you? Sarah asked, resuming the conversation. How was your separation? Different from yours, but equally messy, Ryan replied, adjusting the last beam of the tent. My ex-wife had hidden enormous doubts. I found out when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Credit, cards, loans, financing. She had used the business as collateral without telling me. Wow, that's a terrible betrayal. The worst part wasn't even the financial issue, it was the lie, discovering that the person you share your life with is capable of hiding something so big it breaks any possibility of trust. He struck the hammer harder than necessary. The boys sided with her at first. To them, I was the villain for abandoning the family. Do they know the truth now? Alex knows. He's 17. You can't hide these things. Ethan still doesn't fully understand, and I prefer it. That way, I don't want them growing up hating their mother. Ryan wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Sometimes I think it would be easier if they hated me too. At least it would be a clear emotion, you know. Sarah stopped what she was doing and moved closer to him. Ryan, look at me. He raised his eyes, meeting her determined gaze. Your children don't hate you. They're confused, hurt, trying to understand a world that changed overnight. That's different from hate, she said firmly, and the fact that you care so much about how they feel already shows what kind of father you are. Sometimes it doesn't feel like enough. It never feels like enough. That's the curse of responsible parenthood, Sarah smiled sadly. But you're here, trying. That counts for more than you realize. Done, shouted a voice behind them. The most beautiful tent at the fair. They turned to see Lily running toward them, wearing a blue and white checkered dress and a braid adorned with colorful ribbons. Behind her came Ms. Johnson and several other mothers, all stopping to admire the duo's work. Guys, this is the cutest thing, exclaimed one of the mothers. It looks just like a real country fair tent. Ryan, you're an artist, praised Ms. Johnson. And Sarah, these flowers are perfect. You two work so well together. Lily hugged her mother's legs tightly. Mom, can I fish here tomorrow at the fair? Of course, sweetheart. By the way, you're going to help Mom and Ryan take care of the tent during the fair, Sarah replied, running her hand through her daughter's hair. Really? Ryan asked, surprised. You want me to come tomorrow too? If you want to, of course. Someone needs to keep an eye on the structure, and I need someone who understands if anything breaks, Sarah explained. But there was something more in her invitation. A genuine desire to prolong the partnership that had formed that afternoon. I would love to, Ryan replied, and for the first time in a long time, the prospect of participating in a social event didn't make him anxious. As they packed up the remaining materials, the sun began to set, painting the schoolyard in golden hues. The smell of hot cider started to waft from the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of corn and roasted peanuts. Children ran between the almost finished tents, and parents chatted excitedly about the final preparations. Ryan watched Sarah interacting with the other mothers, noticing how she moved effortlessly in that environment, how she made people laugh with witty comments, how she ensured everyone felt included. There was something magnetic about her way of being that went far beyond physical attraction. Ryan, she called, interrupting his thoughts. Are you okay? You seem distant. I'm great, he replied, smiling. I was just thinking how long it's been since I enjoyed something as simple as this. Simple, she laughed, looking around at the colorful tents, flags fluttering in the wind, and the cheerful buzz of the school community organizing itself. This is anything but simple. This is real community life, you know. It's what makes the difference between just living somewhere and truly belonging to it. Ryan nodded, fully understanding what she meant. For the first time since moving to Brooklyn, he felt part of something bigger than his own problems. The sun was still low on the horizon when Ryan arrived at Central Park that July Saturday. The fresh morning air of New York City filled his nostrils, mixed with the characteristic scent of eucalyptus and wet grass from the dew. He wore a black running shirt, grey shorts, and well-worn hiking shoes, his battle gear for exercise Saturdays that had become a sacred ritual since the separation. He walked toward the running track, passing by groups of morning Tai Chi practitioners and the first cyclists of the day. His mind was still processing the conversation from the night before with Alex, his oldest son, who had finally called after 3 weeks of silence. The boy had confessed to being bullied at his new school for being the son of the failed architect, according to classmates who had discovered the family's financial troubles. "Dad, sometimes I'm embarrassed to say what your job is," Alex had admitted with the brutal honesty of 17. Years. "Everyone here has a dad who's a doctor, lawyer, businessman, and you're starting over from scratch." The words still echoed in Ryan's mind as he began his morning run. Each step on the asphalt of the outdoor track seemed to carry the weight of his uncertainties about fatherhood, career, and future. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he almost didn't notice the familiar figure walking toward the aquatic area of the park. Sarah was holding Lily's hand, both dressed in workout clothes and carrying a pink gym bag. The girl wore swimming goggles around her neck and couldn't stop excitedly talking about something Ryan couldn't hear from a distance. When he realized it was really them, he slowed his pace and waved. Sarah immediately recognized him and waved back, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Ryan, what a coincidence!" she shouted as he approached, breathless but smiling. "Do you always run at this time?" "Every Saturday, religiously," he replied, stopping to catch his breath. "It's my weekly therapy. And you guys, do you always come at this time for swimming?" "Always at 8 on the dot. Lily is obsessed with punctuality when it comes to swimming," Sarah laughed, looking at her daughter who was already impatient to get into the pool. "Right, sweetheart. Ryan, can you swim?" Lily asked directly, with her characteristic curiosity. "I can, princess. I learned when I was about your age," he replied, crouching down to her level. "Then you can watch my class today. I'm learning how to do side breathing," she explained proudly, demonstrating the movement with her arms. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "If you want to watch, there's a spectator area. It's not mandatory, of course, but—" She paused, realizing she was getting flustered. "I mean, if you don't have other plans—" "I would love to," Ryan replied without hesitation. "I can stretch nearby while she swims. That way, I kill 2 birds with 1 stone." They walked together to the aquatic area of the sports complex. The smell of chlorine mixed with sunscreen and the sound of children playing in the water created a cheerful and familiar atmosphere. Ryan settled into one of the white plastic chairs in the waiting area, while Sarah took Lily to change in the locker room. When they returned, Lily was unrecognizable in her pink swim cap, goggles adjusted, and a confidence Ryan had never seen before. Sarah sat next to him, wearing a white t-shirt over her swimsuit and beach shorts. "She has changed so much since she started swimming," Sarah commented, watching her daughter join a group of other kids at the pool's edge. "At the beginning of the year, she could barely put her face in the water. Now look at her." Lily waved at them before jumping into the pool with ease, following the instructions of the instructor, a young, energetic guy who managed to keep the attention of 8 kids simultaneously. "It's impressive how they transform when they find something they really enjoy," Ryan observed, genuinely amazed. "My kids were like that with soccer when they were little. Alex would come home muddy from head to toe, but with a smile that lasted all day." "And now? Do they still play?" "Alex stopped when he started high school. He said he didn't have time for child's play." "Ethan still plays occasionally, but without the enthusiasm he used to have," Ryan sighed. "Sometimes I wonder when exactly they stopped being kids and started carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders." Sarah watched him closely, noticing the melancholy in his voice. "Maybe they haven't stopped being kids. Maybe they're just carrying weights they shouldn't have to carry." "What do you mean?" "Children of divorced parents sometimes feel obligated to grow up faster, as if they need to take care of their parents' feelings, you know?" she explained, keeping her eyes on Lily, who was now practicing strokes in the pool. "Lily sometimes asks me if I'm sad, if I need anything, if she's behaving well. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about those things." "Do you think I'm doing that to them? Putting responsibilities on them that aren't theirs?" Sarah turned to look at him directly. I'm not judging, Ryan. I'm sharing experiences. We all make that mistake sometimes. The difference is recognizing it and trying to change. A joyful shout from the pool interrupted their conversation. Lily had managed to swim an entire lap, using side breathing, and waved excitedly at them. "Did you see? I did it!" she shouted with a radiant smile. "Congratulations, champ!" Ryan shouted back, clapping enthusiastically. Sarah smiled, watching the natural interaction between them. "You know what impresses me? How you talk to her. You don't use that voice adults use with kids, you know? You talk to her like she's a real person." "Because she is," Ryan replied simply. "A child isn't a pet or a doll. They're little people with opinions, feelings, personalities. I've always treated my kids that way." "And do they know that?" The question caught Ryan off guard. He was silent for a few minutes, watching Lily practice shallow dives in the shallow end of the pool. "Honestly, I don't know. Lately, I feel like everything I do is criticized or questioned. Alex complains that I'm absent, but when I'm present, he says I'm suffocating. Ethan barely talks to me. Sometimes I think it would be better if I just paid the child support and disappeared from their lives." "Ryan!" Sarah exclaimed, genuinely shocked. "Don't say that. You're going through a tough time, but that doesn't mean you're a bad dad." "No? Then why do I feel like I'm failing at everything?" Sarah thought carefully before responding. "Can I tell you something? In the first year after the divorce, I cried every night. Lily started having nightmares, became aggressive at school, refused to eat. I was convinced I had ruined my daughter's life because of the divorce." "And what changed?" "Her psychologist explained to me that children go through an adjustment period, that the issues weren't a result of my failures as a mom, but a natural reaction to a drastic change in her life," Sarah explained, watching her daughter, who was now chatting animatedly with a friend at the edge of the pool. "It took almost a year for me to understand that providing emotional stability was more important than being perfect." Ryan absorbed her words, feeling something loosen in his chest. "Do you think I should take them to therapy?" "I think you should consider therapy for yourself first," she replied gently. "Not as something wrong with you, but as a tool to better understand how to communicate with them in this new family dynamic." "I never thought of it that way. We always think that admitting we need help is a sign of weakness. But in reality, it's the opposite. It's the courage to want to do better." Lily's class ended, and she emerged from the pool radiating pride, running to hug Sarah, soaking wet and all. "Mum, did you see? I swam the whole pool without stopping." "I did, my love. I'm so proud," Sarah replied, wrapping her daughter in a fluffy towel. "And Ryan saw too. Tell him about your side breathing technique." As Lily enthusiastically explained her new swimming technique, Ryan observed the dynamic between mother and daughter. There was genuine affection, but also clear boundaries. Sarah celebrated her daughter's successes without overdoing it, corrected inappropriate behaviors without humiliating, and showed real interest in the things that mattered to the child. "Ryan, are you coming back next Saturday?" Lily asked, already dressed with her damp hair hidden under a pink cap. "If you don't mind, I'd love to," he replied, looking at Sarah for confirmation. "Of course we don't mind," she smiled. "In fact, it would be great to have regular company. Pool Saturdays can be a bit lonely sometimes." They walked together to the park exit, Lily between the two adults, sharing details about the lesson and making plans for the following week. The sun was now higher, warming the air and making the asphalt shine. The movement in the park had increased considerably. Entire families were arriving for picnics, running groups were forming, and the sound of music came from various directions. "Sarah," Ryan said when they reached the parking lot, "thank you for the conversation today. It had been a while since I could see things from a different perspective." "You're welcome. Sometimes we just need someone to listen without judging, right?" "That's right," he agreed. And Lily, congratulations on your swimming. You're becoming a real mermaid." The girl laughed and struck a dramatic pose. "Next Saturday, I'll show you how to dive." As they got into the car, Ryan stood still for a few minutes, processing everything that had happened. The conversation with Sarah had planted important ideas in his mind about fatherhood, about asking for help, about allowing his children to be kids, even amidst family difficulties. He picked up his phone, and before he could change his mind, sent a message to Alex. "Son, how about we have lunch together tomorrow? I have some important things to discuss with you, and I want to hear about your new school too." The reply came 15 minutes later. "Sure, Dad. It's about time." Ryan smiled, putting the phone away. Maybe small changes could lead to bigger transformations. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild the bridges that seemed to have collapsed. Ryan's silver Civic climbed the Rocky Mountains, filled with expectations and a strange mix of nervousness. It was September, and spring had timidly arrived in New York. But in the mountains of Aspen, winter still lingered with its chilly mornings and sunny afternoons. In the passenger seat, Sarah adjusted the GPS while checking for the third time if she had packed enough jackets in the trunk. In the back seat, 3 children of completely different ages were trying to find a balance between conversations, video games, and the changing scenery with every turn. Lily, now 8 years old and more talkative than ever, couldn't stop asking questions about everything she saw out the window. Why do the trees look different as we go up? Why is it colder? Why is there fog? Ethan, 15, patiently answered his younger sister's questions, showing a maturity that surprised Ryan. The boy had agreed to spend the weekend with them after much dialogue and some promises that there would be Wi-Fi at the hotel. Alex, at 17, remained more reserved, headphones around his neck and a contemplative gaze directed out the window, but he had agreed to come at the last minute, something Ryan considered a small victory. "Dad, did you bring us here when we were little?" Ethan asked, taking his eyes off his phone to observe the winding road. "Only once, when you were about 7 and 5. Alex cried the whole trip because he got car sick, and you were amazed by the altitude." Ryan laughed, watching in the rearview mirror as his older son cracked a half-smile at the memory. "I remember that," Alex commented, taking one of the earbuds out. "And I remember you bought me that giant teddy bear in the city center, that you named Bruno and took everywhere for months," Ryan added, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "Your mum complained that he took up half the bed." Sarah watched the family interaction with interest and tenderness. It was the first time she saw Ryan relaxed in the presence of his children, and the first time the boys seemed genuinely interested in talking to their dad. The therapy Ryan had started 2 months ago, following her suggestion, seemed to be having an effect. "Sarah, have you been here before?" Alex asked, including her in the conversation for the first time since they left New York. "A few times when I was a child with my parents, and only once after." "Of course, I went on a school trip when I worked there," she replied, turning partially to look at him. "But I never had the chance to stay in a hotel here. It was always a day trip." "Mom, when we get there, can I buy hot chocolate?" Lily asked, interrupting the conversation. "Of course, sweetheart. By the way, Aspen's specialty is chocolate and fondue. We're going to eat a lot of sweets this weekend." Sarah laughed, noticing how her daughter's eyes lit up. "I've never had fondue," Ethan commented, intrigued. "Then you're going to get hooked," Alex said knowingly. "It's impossible to eat fondue and not want more." The hotel Ryan had chosen was located in a more remote area away from the city center, surrounded by pine trees and overlooking the mountains. It was a family-run establishment, not luxurious but cozy, with rustic decor and fireplaces in various rooms. The smell of burning wood mixed with the aroma of pine, creating a cabin-like atmosphere that immediately relaxed everyone. "Wow!" Lily exclaimed upon entering the lobby, taking in the dark wooden furniture, the wool blankets spread across the sofas, and the crackling fireplace. "It looks like a movie set." "It really does," Ethan agreed, equally impressed. "Dad, how did you find this place?" "Internet research and a lot of luck," Ryan replied while checking in. "I wanted something different from the city, but that you all would feel comfortable in." The room he had reserved for Sarah and Lily was next to his, which he would share with his two sons. It was the first time they were functioning as a united family, and everyone seemed aware of the delicacy of the moment. "Can I explore the hotel?" Lily asked, as soon as they dropped their luggage in the rooms. "Let's all go together," Ryan suggested. "I want to check the place out too." They spent the afternoon exploring the hotel's amenities: a game room, a library with a fireplace, an indoor garden with swings, and a short trail leading to a lookout point with a view of the valley. The temperature was mild, but the mountain air brought that characteristic dry chill that made everyone walk closer to one another. "Mum, look at all the stars!" Lily shouted when they reached the lookout, even though it was only 5 in the afternoon and the sky was still bright. "We'll come back here at night, Princess. Then you'll see a sky full of stars," Ryan promised, sitting on one of the wooden benches installed there. Alex and Ethan sat on a nearby rock, and for the first time in a long while, the two brothers were talking naturally, without the tension that had marked the last few months. Sarah settled on the bench next to Ryan, watching her 3 children, hers and his, interacting as if they had been true siblings for years. "It's working," she whispered to him, smiling as she saw Lily trying to teach Ethan to identify cloud shapes. "For now," Ryan replied, but there was hope in his voice. "Thank you for agreeing to this crazy idea. I know it wasn't easy to accept traveling with 2 teenagers you barely know." "They're great boys, Ryan. They just needed space to be kids again," Sarah observed, seeing Alex help Lily climb a low tree for a better view. At dinner, they all sat at a round table in the hotel restaurant. The rustic decor continued in the dining room: exposed wooden beams, wrought iron light fixtures, and a fireplace softly crackling in a corner. The menu offered typical mountain dishes, and Ryan suggested that everyone try something different. "I'll have the cheese fondue for an appetizer and trout for the main course," Alex announced, studying the menu like a food critic. "I want the same as Alex," Lily said immediately, in her phase of imitating everything. Her older brothers did. "Lily, you don't even know what trout is," Sarah laughed. "It's fish, are you sure?" "If Alex is eating it, I'm going to eat it too," she replied with absolute determination. Ethan ordered ribs with cornbread, Sarah chose grilled salmon, and Ryan opted for lamb with mushroom risotto. As they waited for their food to arrive, conversations flowed naturally among various topics: school, work, plans for the next day, funny stories from each of them. "Dad," Ethan said in the middle of dinner, "can I ask a somewhat personal question?" Ryan swallowed his wine and nodded, mentally preparing himself. "Of course, son. Are you and Sarah, dating, or is it just friendship?" The silence that followed was heavy with expectation. Alex stopped eating. Lily looked up from her plate, and Sarah felt her face heat up. Ryan looked at Sarah, who made an almost imperceptible gesture of encouragement with her head. "We're still figuring that out, Ethan. It's all very new for everyone." "But do you like her?" Alex asked directly, with the brutal honesty of teenagers. "I like her a lot," Ryan replied honestly. "And Lily, too. Do you guys mind?" The two boys exchanged glances, a silent communication that only brothers can have. Finally, Ethan spoke. "We want you to be happy, Dad. It's been a while since you really smiled." "And Sarah is cool," Alex added. "She doesn't try to be our mom or anything like that. It's just natural, you know?" Lily, who had been silently following the entire conversation, finally spoke up. "So now I have 2 brothers?" "If you want," Alex replied, genuinely smiling at her. "But we're not going to go easy on you just because you're a girl, okay? I can hold my own," she declared, making everyone laugh. After dinner, they kept their promise and returned to the lookout to stargaze. The sky was clear, and the altitude provided a spectacular view of the Milky Way. Ryan had brought a blanket from the hotel, and they all settled on the wooden bench, pointing out constellations and inventing stories about the shapes formed by the stars. "There's the Southern Cross," Ethan pointed out, proud of being able to identify it. "I learned it at school." "And that one is the Big Dipper," Alex added. "There's a Greek story about it, but I don't remember it." "Well, it was a nymph who was transformed into a bear by Zeus," Sarah explained, "and then he placed her in the sky to protect her." "How do you know that?" Lily asked, impressed. "Teachers need to know a little bit about everything," Sarah laughed. "Kids always ask questions we don't expect." They returned to their rooms around 10 at night, exhausted but happy. Lily fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow, hugging a teddy bear she had received from Alex at the hotel gift shop. Sarah lovingly tucked her in and stepped out into the hallway, where she found Ryan checking to see if the kids were settled in. "They're sleeping," he whispered, gently closing the door. "Ethan didn't even take off his clothes. He fell onto the bed with his shoes on." Lily also conked out instantly. Sarah chuckled softly. "I think it was too much excitement for one day." They walked to a small balcony at the end of the hallway, where they could see the hotel's inner garden lit by low lights. The air was cool, but not uncomfortable, and the mountain silence was broken only by the distant sound of crickets and the occasional crackle of the fireplace downstairs. "Ryan," Sarah began, leaning against the balcony railing, "thank you for today, for including Lily, for letting everything flow naturally, for giving us that sense of family she never really had." "Thank you for agreeing, and for making my kids laugh again," he replied, standing beside her. "I hadn't seen Alex relaxed like this in months." "They are wonderful boys, Ryan. You can be sure you're doing a good job as a dad. Sometimes I still have doubts, but today was different. I felt like maybe we can function as a family. You know, a different kind of family, a bit crazy, but a family." Sarah turned to look at him, noticing how the soft light from the balcony highlighted the lines of worry around his eyes, marks of concern that were beginning to give way to smile lines. "Ryan, can I confess something?" "Of course. When you suggested this trip, I was terrified. I thought it would be forced, awkward, that the kids wouldn't get along." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But today, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. I felt that maybe it's possible to rebuild the idea of family without trying to replicate something that went wrong before." They stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the hotel lights reflecting in the garden and listening to the gentle sound of the wind in the trees. It was a moment of shared quiet, without haste, without expectations beyond simply being there. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "I think I'm falling for you." She turned fully to face him, her heart racing. "I think I am too." When they kissed for the first time, it was with the softness of those aware that they were building something, important and fragile at the same time. The pregnancy test rested on the bathroom sink like a bomb about to explode. Two vibrant pink lines crossed the small plastic window, unmistakable and definitive. Sarah sat on the toilet lid, her legs shaking, trying to process the information that would completely change the course of her newly organized life. It was a chilly October morning. Outside, the typical drizzle of New York created a grey veil over Brooklyn, and the sound of raindrops hitting the bathroom window seemed to mark the time of a decision she wasn't ready to make. For 3 days, She'd been feeling morning sickness, attributing it to work stress or perhaps some virus going around the school. It had never crossed her mind that she could be pregnant. The birthday party in the building had taken place exactly 6 weeks ago. Miss Smith, who lived on the 5th floor, had turned 70, and practically all the neighbors gathered in the party room for the celebration. There was music, homemade food, and a relaxed atmosphere that eased both Sarah and Ryan in a way that hadn't happened in months. They had drunk wine, not too much, but enough to lower the defenses they had both carefully maintained since the beginning of their relationship. The conversation flowed late into the night. The kids had already gone upstairs to sleep, and when they finally said goodbye in the hallway of the 12th floor, the sexual tension that had been building between them for months finally materialized. "Sarah, are you okay in there?" Lily's voice from the other side of the door brought her back to the present moment. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a minute," Sarah replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. She hid the test at the back of the sink drawer, among makeup products and medicines, as if that could make the result disappear. When she left the bathroom, Lily was already dressed for school, backpack on her back and a worried expression on her face. "Mum, you look sick. Are you okay?" "I'm great, Princess. Just a little tired," Sarah lied, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Shall we grab some coffee and head down to meet Ryan?" The morning routine followed automatically. Quick breakfast, checking school supplies, heading down to meet Ryan in the elevator. But when the doors opened and she saw the warm smile he reserved specifically for the two of them, Sarah felt her stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy nausea. "Good morning, ladies," Ryan greeted, kissing Sarah's cheek and affectionately ruffling Lily's hair. "Did you sleep well?" "Mum is acting a bit weird today," Lily informed with the brutal honesty of children. "I think she's getting sick." Ryan looked at Sarah closely, noticing the paleness and the darker circles under her eyes. "Do you want me to take Lily alone today? You can rest a bit." "No need, I'm fine," Sarah replied quickly, but avoided looking directly at him. During the ride to school, Lily chattered about a science project she was working on, an experiment with beans sprouting in cotton. The irony didn't. Sarah was lost in thought as she listened to her daughter talk about little seeds turning into plants while processing the idea of a new life growing inside her. "Sarah," Ryan called as they stopped at the traffic light on Elm Street, "are you sure everything is okay? You seem very quiet." "Just a headache," she murmured. "It must be the weather change." After dropping Lily off at school, Ryan suggested they grab a coffee at the bakery before heading to their respective jobs. Sarah almost declined, but realized she needed some normalcy, a few minutes pretending her life hadn't just turned upside down. They sat at their usual table by the window. Ryan ordered his usual regular coffee and toasted bread, while Sarah opted for just a chamomile tea. Her stomach couldn't handle caffeine at that moment. "Are you sure it's just a headache?" Ryan insisted, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "You've been different since yesterday." Sarah looked at their intertwined hands, noticing how his fingers were darker than hers, how there was a small scar on his right index finger that she had never asked about. They were hands of a dad, hands that had cared for small children, changed diapers, and fed babies in the middle of the night. "Ryan," she began, her voice coming out weaker than she intended, "can I ask a hypothetical question?" "Sure," he replied, but his expression showed he realized the question wouldn't be hypothetical at all. If someone you've known for a few months found out they were pregnant, what would your reaction be?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan slowly released her hand, leaned back in his chair, and for a few seconds seemed to forget how to breathe. His coffee had completely cooled as he processed the information. "Sarah," he started but stopped, clearly struggling to find the right words. "It's not hypothetical," she whispered. confirming what they both already knew. "I found out this morning." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she had learned to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. He looked around the bakery as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. We just—" He paused again, realizing he was treading on delicate ground. "It was that night after Miss Smith's party. Just once, Ryan. One single time," Sarah said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I know it's a terrible situation. I know you already have 2 kids, that you're rebuilding your life, that the last thing you need is more complication." "Stop," Ryan interrupted her, but not harshly. It's not about being complicated. It's about—" "God, Sarah, we barely defined what we are to each other, and now we are parents," she completed, the reality of the situation finally hitting them both fully. They sat in silence for long minutes. The bustle of the bakery continued around them, people ordering coffee, conversations about work, normal life happening while their world crumbled and rebuilt itself simultaneously. "What do you want to do?" Ryan finally asked, his voice heavy with forced maturity. "I don't know," Sarah admitted honestly. "Part of me is terrified. Lily has barely adjusted to the divorce. My financial situation is stable but tight, and I don't know if I'm ready to start all over." "And the other part?" Sarah instinctively touched her still flat belly, where a new life was beginning to form. "The other part already loves this child, and that scares me even more." Ryan watched her gesture, feeling a mix of panic and tenderness he hadn't experienced in years. He remembered the early days of pregnancy with his ex-wife, both with Alex and Ethan, the euphoria, the plans, the feeling that anything was possible. But now it was different. Now he was a 45-year-old man, divorced, struggling to run a small business and win back the love of his teenage children. "Sarah, I need time to process this," he finally said. "Not because I don't care about you, but because I want to make sure that any decision we make is thoughtful and responsible." "I understand," she replied, even though her heart tightened at his answer. "I need time too." "How much time do you have to decide?" The question hung in the air, laden with all its implications. Sarah knew he was asking about medical deadlines, about windows of opportunity for different choices. "A few weeks," she replied. "But Ryan, I need you to know that regardless of what we decide about us, this child will exist. I can't even consider the alternative." Ryan nodded slowly, understanding that part of the decision had already been made. "Okay, so the question isn't if, but how." "Exactly." They stood up to leave, but the dynamic between them had completely changed. There was no longer the casual touch, the goodbye kiss, the lightness that had characterized the last few months. In its place was a heavy tension and a sense of responsibility neither of them had asked for. "Sarah," Ryan said when they reached their cars, "can we talk again tomorrow, when I've had time to think it through?" "Of course," she replied. "But Ryan, please don't abandon me in this. I know it's not what you planned, but we need to face this together." He stepped closer and for the first time that morning touched her face tenderly. "I won't abandon you. I might be scared, I might be lost, but I won't abandon you." When Sarah arrived at work, she had to lock herself in the school bathroom to cry. Not out of sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming weight of knowing her life had changed forever in a single morning, and that from that moment on, every decision she made would affect not only herself and Lily, but a child that didn't even fully exist yet, and a man she loved, but who might not. Raphael was not prepared to be a dad again. The rest of the day passed in a haze of automatic lessons, forced smiles for the kids, and a mental countdown until he could go home and process in silence the magnitude of what was happening. The living room of Miss Johnson's apartment, Ryan's mother in West Side, was impeccably organized as always. Polished mahogany furniture, crystals on the shelf, and the aroma of beeswax, mixed with floral perfume that characterized the house. It was a Sunday in November, and Ryan had been invited to the weekly lunch that had become mandatory since the separation, an attempt by his mother to keep the family together, even after everything that had happened. Alex and Ethan were in the TV room watching soccer, while Ryan tried to find the courage to tell his mother about Sarah's pregnancy. For 3 weeks, he and Sarah had been trying to find a balance between the initial shock of the news and the need to make practical decisions. Their conversations had become tense, laden with unspoken expectations and mutual fears. "Ryan, dear, you look very thin," Miss Johnson commented, adjusting the embroidered napkins on the dining table. At 68, she maintained the elegant posture of someone raised in a time when appearances mattered above all. "And those dark circles, you're not taking care of yourself." "I'm fine, Mom," Ryan replied automatically, helping her place the serving dishes on the table. "Just working too much." "That's what happens when a man your age tries to start over alone. You should consider going back to Fernanda. She called me last week, you know. She said she still loves you." Ryan stopped cutting the bread, his fist clenched around the knife. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm not going back to Fernanda. The marriage is over." "It ended because of money, Ryan. Money can be regained. Family is forever," Miss Johnson insisted, her voice carrying that authoritative tone she had used since he was a child. "And look at what this separation is doing to my grandchildren. Alex is aggressive. Ethan barely speaks to me. They need the family together. The boys are better now, Mom, much better than when Fernanda and I were. Fighting every day." Miss Johnson scoffed, clearly disagreeing. "Nonsense. Children need stability, and stability means having both parents in the same house. By the way, I heard you're dating a teacher." The way she said teacher carried all the class prejudice Ryan knew well. "Sarah, and yes, we're dating." "A divorced teacher with a child, Ryan. Have you thought about what that means? Are you going to support someone else's child now?" "Mom, please," Ryan began, but was interrupted by the entrance of his sons into the dining room. "Grandma, can I serve the soda?" Ethan asked, clearly trying to avoid the tension that had already settled in the room. "Of course, my angel. And tell Grandma how things are going at school," Miss Johnson said, completely changing her tone to the exaggerated affection she reserved for her grandchildren. During lunch, the conversations circled around safe topics: school, soccer, plans for vacation. But Ryan felt the weight of what he needed to tell, and he knew that the longer he delayed, the worse the reaction would be. "Mom," he said when they were having coffee, "I need to tell you something important." Alex and Ethan looked up from their phones, sensing the serious tone in their dad's voice. Miss Johnson paused, stirring her sugar into her coffee, her maternal instincts picking up on trouble from a distance. "Sarah is pregnant," Ryan said directly, without beating around the bush. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Ms. Johnson's spoon clinking against her porcelain cup. Alex and Ethan exchanged glances, processing the information with the typical speed of teenagers. "Pregnant," Ms. Johnson repeated, as if the word were in a foreign language. "How long have you been together? 4 months? 5? 6 months, Ryan corrected. 6 months and she's already pregnant. Ms. Johnson's voice rose an octave. "Ryan, don't you see this is a trap? A divorced woman with a child, a public school teacher, and now she shows up pregnant with my son." "It wasn't a trap, Mom. It was an accident." "Accident?" she practically shouted. "Ryan, you're 45. How can you believe in accident at this stage of life?" Alex spoke up for the first time. "Dad, are you sure it's yours?" The question hit Ryan like a punch in the stomach. "Alex, how can you ask something like that?" "I don't know, Dad. We barely know this woman, and suddenly she's pregnant. It's kind of suspicious, the boy replied, clearly influenced by his grandmother's reactions. Sarah isn't that kind of person, Ryan said firmly, but he could feel his own conviction wavering under the family pressure. All men think they know the women they get involved with, Ryan, Miss Johnson said, rising from the table with abrupt movements. Your ex-wife hid doubts from you for years. This little teacher could be hiding anything. Ethan, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Dad, what are you going to do? It was the question Ryan had been avoiding for weeks. We're going to raise the child together. Together how? Miss Johnson asked, returning to the table with an expression Ryan knew well. The same one she wore when he was a child and had committed some serious mischief. Are you going to marry her, move in together, support a child of a woman you've known for 5 minutes? 6 months, Mom. And it's not supporting a child of a woman. It's taking responsibility for my own child. If it's yours, she murmured, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The conversation continued for another hour, increasingly heavy and laden with veiled accusations. When Ryan finally managed to leave his mother's house, he felt exhausted and confused. The doubts he had managed to control in the last few weeks, doubts echoed in her mind, fueled by her family's suspicions. Meanwhile, in Sarah's apartment in Brooklyn, a similar scene was unfolding, but with different characters. Her parents, Mr. Johnson and Ms. Johnson, had driven 200 miles from Springfield for a surprise visit after Sarah finally revealed her pregnancy over the phone. Sarah, honey, you can't be serious, Ms. Johnson said for the 3rd time. In an hour. She was a robust 60-year-old woman, with graying hair always tied up in a bun and calloused hands from a lifetime of working the land. You just got out of a bad marriage, you're raising Lily alone, and now you decide to get pregnant by a man you barely know? Mom, I already explained that it wasn't planned. It wasn't planned because you didn't take care of yourself, Mr. Johnson interrupted, pacing back and forth in the small living room. At 65, he maintained the restless energy of someone who had spent his life waking up before dawn to work on the farm. Sarah, you've always been the most responsible, the smartest daughter in the family. How did you get yourself into this situation? Lily was in her room, theoretically doing homework, but Sarah knew she was listening to every word of the discussion. The girl had noticed the changes in her mother's routine over the past few weeks. The morning sickness, the irritability, the whispered phone conversations. And this man? This Ryan? Ms. Johnson continued, scrolling through photos on Sarah's phone as if she could decipher his character through the images. Do you know anything about his family, about his financial situation, why he separated from his wife? I know Ryan, Mum. He's a good man, a good father. A good father who abandoned his own children to live alone? Mr. Johnson questioned. Sarah, you're repeating the same mistake as before, getting involved with a complicated man with family issues. It's not the same, Dad. Ryan has never mistreated me, never drank, never— Not yet, Miss Johnson interrupted. A man always shows his best side at first. Once you're stuck with the child, that's when you find out who he really is. Sarah felt tears beginning to form. You don't understand. I love him. Love? Mr. Johnson practically grunted. Sarah, you're 32 years old, with an 8-year-old daughter, and you're talking about love like you're a teenager. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't raise children. Love doesn't guarantee that the man will stay when things get tough. What do you want me to do? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. That I end everything with him? That I raise another child alone? We want you to come home, Miss Johnson said firmly. Come to Springfield with Lily and the baby. We'll help you raise both you. Can teach at the town school. You'll have the whole family around. You won't need to depend on any man. And what about Ryan? What if he wants to be part of the baby's life? If he really wants to, he'll step up, Mr. Johnson replied pragmatically. A decent man doesn't let a woman he got pregnant turn her back and leave. If he does, it's because he wasn't worth it. The conversation stretched on throughout the afternoon, with Sarah's parents presenting increasingly convincing arguments about the dangers of trusting a man she had known for a short time, about the difficulties of raising a child in New York, about the advantages of having a family support network. When they finally left in the early evening, Sarah was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Lily, who had remained strangely quiet all day, approached her mother, who was sitting on the couch. "Mom, are you really going to have a baby?" Sarah pulled her daughter onto her lap, feeling the weight of all the decisions she needed to make. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to have a baby." "And will Ryan be the baby's dad?" "Yes. So he'll be kind of my daddy too." Lily's innocent question made Sarah realize that it wasn't just she and Ryan who needed to make decisions. There was an 8-year-old child who had already become attached to the idea of having a complete family again, and now that family was being questioned from all sides. "I don't know, Princess. We're still deciding how it will be." "I like Ryan, Mom. He draws castles for me and never gets mad when I ask questions." Sarah hugged her daughter tighter, feeling the weight of a child's expectations who just wanted a father present in her life. Outside, the light November rain tapped against the window, and she wondered if she was being selfish by trying to build a family with a man who might not be truly prepared for the sacrifices that entailed. That same night, Ryan and Sarah spoke on the phone for the first time in 3 days. The conversation was tense, laden with doubts neither had dared to express before. "Families are complicating everything," Sarah said, tired. "Yeah. My mum basically called me a manipulated idiot," Ryan replied, bitterness evident in his voice. "And now, how do we decide what to do with all this external pressure?" "I don't know, Sarah. Honestly, I don't know anything anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, with all the words neither was ready to say, about fears, about doubts, about the possibility that maybe everyone was right and they were making a huge mistake. The February morning was muggy, with that typical humid heat of summer that made the air vibrate in the streets of Brooklyn. Sarah was in her kitchen, preparing breakfast with mechanical movements, when the phone rang. It was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and Lily had already left for school. Her belly, 4 months along, her pregnancy began to show under her loose shirt, a physical sign that made it impossible to pretend her life hadn't changed completely. "Hello?" she answered, recognizing the number of the law firm that had handled her divorce. "Sarah, this is Dr. Johnson. I need to talk to you about a situation that has come up. Can you come to the office today?" "Did something happen with Lily's support?" Sarah asked, feeling her stomach tighten. Lately, any unexpected phone call put her on high alert. "It's more complicated than that. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come at 2 in the afternoon?" 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting in Dr. Johnson's cramped office, a 50-year-old man with thick glasses and a perpetually worried expression. The office smelled of old paper and strong coffee, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with legal codes that seemed to judge everyone present. "Sarah, your ex-husband contacted me yesterday," Dr. Johnson began, flipping through a stack of papers on the desk. "Apparently, he learned about your pregnancy through mutual acquaintances." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What does he want?" "He wants to reconcile." The words hung in the air like a sentence. Sarah blinked several times, trying to process the information. "What do you mean, reconcile?" "He claims that the separation was a mistake, that you could try again for the sake of Lily and the new baby," Dr. Johnson explained, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He also mentioned that he is willing to take responsibility for the child you are expecting. But the child isn't his. He knows that. But legally, if you were married when the child is born, he could register it as his, the lawyer clarified. Sarah, I need to be direct with you. He is also offering a very interesting financial proposal. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, feeling a mix of curiosity and disgust. What kind of proposal? He bought a house in Beverly Hills, 4 bedrooms, a pool, gourmet area. He wants you and Lily to move there. He commits to paying all the house expenses, private education for Lily and the baby, a premium health plan, and even a monthly allowance for your personal expenses. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of traffic from Harmony Street, filtering through the open windows of the office. Sarah felt as if she were hearing an offer to sell her soul. And in return, you would become a traditional family again. Lily would have a present father, you would have financial security, and the baby would be born into a structured home, Dr. Johnson recited, as if reading a contract. He also mentioned that he is undergoing treatment for alcoholism and individual couples therapy. Sarah leaned back in her chair, instinctively placing her hand on her belly. The offer was tempting in a way that frightened her. In the last 2 months, since their families had interfered in her relationship with Ryan, everything had become more difficult. They still talked, still tried to find a way together, but there was a constant tension, a feeling that they were building on quicksand. Dr. Johnson, may I ask for your professional opinion? Financially speaking, it's a very good offer, Sarah. You would know exactly what to expect. You would have guaranteed stability for you and the children. He paused, taking off his glasses to clean them. But you need to consider the emotional aspect. Can you imagine living again with a man who mistreated you? He says he has changed. Everyone says they have changed. The question is, do you believe it? Sarah left the office in shock, wandering the streets of Brooklyn aimlessly. She stopped at a small park and sat on a bench under the shade of a tree, trying to organize her thoughts. Children played on the nearby playground, and she watched a mother pushing her daughter on the swing, both laughing carefree. Was this what she wanted for Lily and the baby on the way? That lightness, that financial ease, the certainty that there would always be someone to share the responsibilities? Her phone rang. It was Ryan. "Hi," she answered, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. "Hi. How are you? We haven't really talked since Sunday." "Ryan, can you come pick me up? I'm at the park on Harmony Street and I need to talk to you about something important." "Sure, I'm leaving now." 20 minutes later, Ryan parked his Civic near the park. He was wearing a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a worried expression that intensified when he saw Sarah's emotional state. "What happened?" he asked, sitting next to her on the bench. Sarah told him about the lawyer's call, about her ex-husband's proposal, about the house in Beverly Hills and all the promises of financial stability. Ryan listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each detail revealed. "And are you considering it?" he asked when she finished. "I don't know, Ryan. Honestly, I don't know what to think anymore," Sarah replied, tears finally starting to fall. "In the last 2 months, since our families started interfering in our lives, everything has become so difficult. We can barely have a conversation without arguing about expectations, about money, about the future." Ryan stood up from the bench and walked a few steps, his hands in his pockets. "Sarah, do you think I can't give you stability? It's not that." "It is." He turned to face her. "You're comparing me to a guy who has a house in Beverly Hills, who can pay for private school, who can afford a middle-class lifestyle, and I'm rebuilding my business from scratch, sharing a rented apartment, trying to win back my own kids." "Ryan, you're not being fair." "Fair?" He laughed bitterly. What's not fair is you being pregnant with my child and considering marrying another man because he can offer a better life. It's not just about money. Sarah stood up too, her voice rising. It's about being sure I can count on someone. It's about not lying awake at night wondering if you will decide that this is all too complicated and just disappear. I never gave you any reason to think I would disappear. No? Then why, every time your parents make comments about me, do you go 2 days without talking to me? Why do you hesitate every time someone asks how our plans are for when the baby arrives? Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but found no arguments, because she was right. He had let himself be influenced by his family's doubts, questioning internally whether he was making the right decisions, whether he was ready to be a dad again under such complicated circumstances. Sarah, I'm scared, he finally admitted, his voice coming out softer. I'm scared I won't be the father you need me to be for this child. I'm scared I won't be able to give you the life you deserve. I'm scared that, in the end, you'll realize I'm just not enough. She moved closer to him, touching his face with both hands. Ryan, do you think I'm not scared too? Do you think it's easy for me to bet everything on a relationship that just started? That it's simple to create a blended family with 3 kids of different ages? So what do we do? I don't know, she whispered, but I know I need to make a decision soon. My ex-husband wants an answer by the end of the week. They returned to the car in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. During the drive to Sarah's apartment, Ryan drove on autopilot, processing the information that he might lose the woman he loved and the baby on the way to a man who could offer everything he couldn't. Ryan, Sarah said when he stopped in front of the building, I love you. I need you to know that, but I also need to think about what's best for the kids. I understand, he replied, but his voice was heavy with deep sadness. And Sarah, I love you too, more than I thought I would be able to love again. When she got out of the car, Ryan remained still for long minutes, watching her enter the building. There was a sense of finality in the air, as if they both knew something fundamental had changed in that conversation. The offer from Sarah's ex-husband was not just about money or stability, it was about 2 completely different visions of the future, and which one Sarah would choose to embrace. That night, Sarah lay in bed with Lily, who had asked to sleep with her mom because she was missing the family they were building. The girl was sleeping soundly, hugging the teddy bear that Alex had given her in Aspen, oblivious to the adult decisions that could completely change the course of their lives. Sarah ran her hand over her belly, feeling the first gentle movements of the baby. It was a magical and terrifying sensation at the same time, life growing inside her while the world around seemed to crumble. In a few days, she would have to choose between the uncertain love she felt for Ryan and the security her ex-husband offered. And whatever her choice, she knew she would be renouncing something important. On the other side of town, Ryan was sitting in the living room of his still partially disorganized apartment, staring at a blank sheet of paper on the table. He had started to draw several times, floor plans for houses he would never build, dream projects that might never materialize. For the first time in months, his creative hands were paralyzed by uncertainty about the future. The General Hospital had that characteristic smell of disinfectant mixed with anxiety that permeates all maternity wards. It was a clear May morning, and the first rays of sunlight streamed through the tall windows, creating geometric patterns on the shiny linoleum floor. Sarah was in the delivery room, sweating and focused, while Ryan held her hand with enough strength to leave marks. "One more contraction, Sarah. You're doing great," encouraged Dr. Johnson, the experienced obstetrician who had been following the pregnancy for 2 months since Sarah had finally made her decision. The decision that changed everything had happened on a rainy afternoon in March, exactly 1 year after their first meeting in the hallway of the apartment. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. When Lily came home from school with a worried expression that had become frequent in recent weeks. "Mum, are you really going to marry Dad again?" the girl had asked, directly, sitting at the kitchen table with her backpack still on. "Why are you asking that, sweetheart?" "Because everyone at school is talking about it. Sophia's mom told the teacher that you were going back to Dad and moving to a big house," Lily explained, her 8-year-old eyes filled with a forced maturity. "And I was thinking, if we move, will Ryan still be our friend?" The question hit Sarah like a bolt of clarity. She knelt beside her daughter, watching the worried face of the child who had deeply attached herself to the idea of having Ryan as a father figure. "Lily, what do you prefer? Living in a big house with Dad or staying here close to Ryan?" "Can I tell the truth?" "Always. I like Ryan more. He doesn't yell, he draws with me, he talks about important things like I'm grown up," Lily confessed. "And when he's here, you're happier, Mom. I can see it in the way you smile." That night, Sarah called Dr. Smith and definitively rejected her ex-husband's proposal. The next day, she showed up at Ryan's office unannounced, finding him bent over a sketch pad, drawing the design of a small but full house. In the midst of affectionate details, "Is it for us?" she had asked, observing the drawing that depicted 3 bedrooms, an open living area with the kitchen, and a small but well-planned garden. "It was a dream," Ryan replied, lifting his eyes from the paper. "Something I had been imagining over the last few days, in case you chose to stay." "Ryan, I chose. I chose you. I chose us." The kiss that followed sealed not only the reconciliation, but the commitment to build something solid together, despite all the difficulties. Now, 2 months later, Sarah felt the last contraction before the birth. The scream that escaped her throat was a mix of pain and relief. And when the baby finally entered the world, the silence that followed was broken by the strong cry of a child, announcing her presence. "It's a girl," announced Dr. Johnson, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. "A beautiful and healthy girl." Ryan watched their newborn daughter with tears streaming down his face. She was small, with dark hair and eyes that were trying to open to the new world. Her tiny hands moved in the air as if drawing invisible shapes. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's head. "It's the most perfect thing I've ever seen in my life." Sarah smiled through her exhaustion. "What are we going to name her?" "Emily," Ryan said without hesitation. "Emily Sarah." "Emily Sarah Mitchell," Sarah repeated, testing how it sounded. "It's beautiful." In the waiting room, Lily was sitting between Alex and Ethan, all 3 eager to meet their new sister. Alex had completely transformed over the past few months. After long talks with Ryan about responsibility and family, the 17-year-old had taken on a protective role towards Lily and displayed a maturity that surprised everyone. "Do you think she'll like soccer?" Ethan asked nervously, fiddling with his phone without really paying attention to the screen. "She'll like whatever she wants to like," Alex replied wisely. "The important thing is that she has all of us to take care of her." "Can I teach her drawing when she grows up?" Lily asked, swinging her legs on the chair that was too high for her height. "Of course you can, Princess," said a familiar voice behind them. It was Ms. Johnson, Ryan's mother, carrying a bouquet of yellow flowers and wearing an expression very different from the hostility she had shown months ago. "Grandma!" Ethan jumped up to hug her. "You came!" "Of course I did. It's not every day that the first granddaughter is born," she replied, but her eyes were on Lily. "Hi, sweetie. Are you excited to be a big sister?" Lily nodded shyly. Over the past 2 months, Ms. Johnson had made a genuine effort to connect with the family that her son was building. It hadn't been easy. Her class prejudices and rigid ideas about traditional family took time to change. But witnessing her son's happiness and the respectful way Sarah raised Lily had gradually softened her resistance. "Ms. Johnson," Lily said softly. "Do you want to see the drawing I made for Emily?" "Of course I do, my love." Lily opened her small backpack and took out a sheet of paper with a colourful drawing of a family of 5 holding hands in front of a house with a garden. Above the drawing, in carefully formed letters, it read, "My Big Family." Miss Johnson looked at the drawing for long seconds, her eyes filling with tears. In the drawing she could see Ryan tall and smiling, Sarah with long hair, Lily small in the middle, and 2 boys clearly representing Alex and Ethan, and in Sarah's arms a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket. "It's very beautiful, dear," she said, her voice choked. "Can I keep it?" "Of course. I made it special for you." At that moment, Ryan appeared at the door of the waiting room, still wearing the hospital's blue disposable uniform, with a smile that lit up his tired face. "Do you want to meet Emily?" The procession that formed towards the maternity room looked like a small celebration. Alex and Ethan were competing over who would go in first. Lily was bouncing with excitement, and Miss Johnson walked more slowly, still processing the emotion of becoming a grandmother again. When they entered the room, Sarah was reclining on the bed, with the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. The soft afternoon light streamed through the window, creating a golden atmosphere that made the scene look like it was straight out of a movie. "Everyone, this is Emily Sarah," Ryan announced proudly. Lily approached first, observing her sister with absolute reverence. "She's tiny like a doll. Can I touch her?" "Of course, sweetheart, but gently," Sarah replied, helping Lily stroke the baby's tiny fist. Alex and Ethan took turns holding their sister, both clearly nervous but delighted. "She has her father's hands," Alex noted, noticing the baby's long fingers. "She'll be an architect just like him." "Or a teacher like Sarah," Ethan suggested. "Or an astronaut, or a veterinarian, or anything she wants to be." Miss Johnson was the last to hold her granddaughter. When the baby was placed in her arms, Emily opened her eyes for the first time since birth, revealing dark irises that seemed to focus directly on her grandmother's face. "Hi, my princess," Miss Johnson whispered. "I am your grandma, Emily. I apologize for taking so long to understand that you are exactly what my son needed." The baby made a soft sound, as if responding, and squeezed Miss Johnson's finger with surprising strength. "I think she forgave you, Mom," Ryan said, watching the scene with tenderness. Later, when the visitors had left and only the nuclear family remained in the room, Sarah watched Ryan sitting in the chair next to the bed, Emily sleeping peacefully in his arms as he softly hummed a lullaby he had sung to Alex and Ethan when they were babies. "Ryan," she called softly. "Yes? Do you regret it? About all this? I mean, the complication, the responsibility, having to start over with a ready-made family." He lifted his eyes from his daughter and looked directly at her. "Sarah, do you remember the day you knocked on my door asking for sugar? How could I forget? That day I was a lost man, bitter, convinced that I had lost everything that mattered in life. Today I'm holding our daughter in a hospital room, surrounded by 5 people I love more than my own life." He paused, gently kissing the baby's forehead. "If this is complication, then let all the complications in the world come." Lily, who had fallen asleep in the visitor's chair, murmured something in her dreams about "your big family." Alex and Ethan were quietly chatting in the hallway with other relatives who had arrived. Outside, New York continued its frantic pace, but in that room, time seemed suspended in a perfect moment. "You know what I was thinking?" Sarah said, adjusting herself better in bed. "What? That maybe the sugar was just an excuse. Maybe deep down, I already knew I needed what you could give me. And what was that? The chance to start over, the courage to believe that love can be simple every day, made of small gestures and daily decisions to care for each other." Ryan smiled, watching Emily, who was peacefully sleeping in his arms. So we did it. We managed to turn borrowed sugar into a real family. We did, Sarah agreed, reaching out to touch Ryan's face. And the most amazing part is that this is just the beginning. The sun was beginning to set over New York, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues. In the maternity ward, a unique and imperfect family, built through coincidences and brave choices, silently celebrated the birth of a new life that forever sealed the bonds they had chosen to create together. Emily Marina Mitchell slept peacefully, surrounded by 5 hearts beating in unison, proving that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose to build, one decision at a time, one day at a time, with all the love we are capable of offering.